So if you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/timber to get a huge discount off your Nord VPN plan plus 4 additional months for free. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a cricketer protects its nether region with NordVPN today. Okay, so morning everyone. Let's just have a moment for Test cricket. Because I think as cricket fans, and certainly as Test fans, we have to really celebrate days like this, because what happened today is not going to happen very much. Yeah, there are more Tests played these days, and you know that changes things a little bit, and there are more results and everything like that. But the chances of having two incredible matches like we have seen today in the one in the one go is just so unlikely, right? Just absolutely remarkably unlikely to have a Test match like today overlap with another Test match like today. And you don't even know which one I'm talking about. I don't even know which one I'm talking about. And I want to focus just a little bit on just some of the stories, because I think it's really, really cool if you really start to think about it a little bit. Like Ollie Pope, there was a legitimate concern how he played in the first innings with his history of playing in Asia against spin. By the third Test, the vice captain might not be playable, right? What a remarkable innings, and counter-attacking and playing dill scoops. Like, where did the dill scoop come from? Like, I love the way he changed his batting under wobble ball against pace bowling, and he's done a similar thing under baz ball for spin as well. Just remarkable, right? And Alzari Joseph in the other Test match. So Alzari Joseph, I think, if I'm not wrong, had 6 wickets against Australia coming into this Test match. He just never really performed all that well. He takes 6 wickets in this Test match and makes runs as well. Like, what a valuable contribution in what was an incredibly close and an incredibly low-scoring game. Like, he was all over the place everywhere, right? And then you've got Steve Smith, who, madman. Like, I still can't quite get my head around why he wanted to open and, like, forced himself on that position. It's such a weird thing for a player in the twilight of his career to just be like, do you know what, maybe I can make my life harder, not easier, by going to the top of the order, especially in an era when seam bowlers have been taking a lot of wickets, right? And he carries his bat in a loss after, 2 or 3 failures in a row, opening the batting so far. You've got Ashwin batting in the dark, in the shadows at the end, almost trying to time waste at times, and then after that, maybe trying to counterattack, trying to hope that they get close enough that they could finish it at night, thinking to himself, that sort of Machiavellian brain of his, thinking, no, now we have to score quicker, whereas earlier we had to go slow. And earlier in the game, of course, not doing a man-cat when he had a chance. And the person he did man-cat is Tom Hartley. What a stupid debut for Tom Hartley. Like, stupid crazy. He hits a 4, the first ball he ever faces. I think it was off Ashwin as well. He then gets it for 6, his first ball. Like, he's bowling with the new ball. He clearly has no idea. It's almost like it won't come out of his fingers. India get well on top. He just can't get any pressure back on the Indian players. Even when he gets a wicket, it's not anything to write home about, although at that stage he would have taken absolutely anything. There's discussions about if Stokes has misused him and all this sort of stuff. He keeps dropping the ball short. He's bowling full tosses. He's not particularly accurate, like all these different problems. Comes out and bats in the second innings, and again, just a valuable contribution with the bat. This kind of weird sort of bottom hand style that he has, which is, I don't know, odd and almost not made for these kinds of conditions. He's got this old-fashioned English backlift where it's up around his ear for no reason, and a bit of a flappy front knee, like just a weird creature. And then he comes out to bowl, and his first couple of wickets are like almost off the face. Well, certainly one of them was completely off the face of the bat, right? And then the other one, more or less off the face of the bat. And then by the end, he's bowling absolute dream balls. And what a bizarre, like almost, dare I say it, Jason Krejci with a happy ending debut for Tom Hartley. I haven't seen many weirder test matches than, and certainly weirder debuts from start to finish in batting and bowling. Got a run out as well. Like, the whole thing was bizarre. And then you have Shamar Joseph, who I don't even know where to start with him. You know, this is someone who certainly in the pre-professional days probably doesn't even have a chance to, you know, make a career. And even then needs a boost from his community to sort of end up in a situation where someone from West Indies can take a look at him and go, oh, there's something here. And if you think about these two players put together, like, they have less experience in the middle of well, professional cricket, let alone international cricket, you know, than like a Pujara innings combined, right? And you know, with Shamar, he comes to Australia, probably everyone assumes, even if there was a lot of talk about how he was a talented bowler, but you're still assuming he's going to come to Australia, he's going to get on some flat wickets and get smashed everywhere. Instead, obviously, the complete opposite happens. He wins over Australia in one test. And then in the second test, he is batting, he almost loses his toe when batting. And then bowls this and it doesn't even look like he's going to continue the game. And then he bowls this incredibly long spell. And of course he does. You know, why would he not want to do that? You know, you see footage of Lara and Hooper, you know, crying, and Tom Hartley accidentally swearing in interviews because he gets confused. Like, this just means something to people. And look, we get caught up in the politics and the nonsense of Test match cricket sometimes. And, you know, this is largely an analysis channel and everything else. And I get all that sort of stuff. But we as Test fans, and I include the players, like everyone who loves cricket, Test cricket, not just the fans, but the fans of it who are players and commentators and media and, you know, all these different jobs, administrators and, you know, physios and all this sort of stuff. The people who love it put their life into it. We don't get many days when Test cricket shines back on us, right? Like, T20 and ODI cricket are set up for close finishes. We're supposed to get a result. And because of that, we manufactured a version of our sport where it's close over and over again. Test cricket, like, it makes you work. It makes you put in the hours, right? And the people who watched the majority of these two tests, some of which even flicking between the two, or friends of mine who had both screens up at the same time, and, you know, all this sort of stuff. Like, you put the hours in for days like this when everything comes together, right? And it was just absolutely beautiful to have a moment like that and to remember that, you know, that is what Test cricket is. For all the nonsense and everything else, when Test cricket gets tense, when Test cricket gets close, when Test cricket is at its absolute best, there just isn't anything else like it. It just is on another level. And we certainly saw that for two weirdly overlapping Test matches of just pure, I suppose, joy at the end of the day. You know, if you're an Australian fan, you lost. If you're an Indian fan, you lost. They've both lost. They've both won a lot, right? That's okay. They'll live to fight other days. But you don't get many moments like this of just so many great stories coming together. Test cricket, you know. So let's get on to this particular day, because this on its own is remarkable. India come out in the morning, again, just look a little bit limp and lifeless. They stood around hoping that the old ball would reverse a little bit. They did actually get a wicket with that, but they just kind of were waiting for the cricket to happen to them, which at times seemed to be the case in this match. England just chipped away with the total. They used the old ball, especially Pope, to get some throwdowns to get himself back in. And England just kept chipping away at the score until they were in a position where they were passing milestones that were, you know, annoying. So 150, 175, 200, 225. They just kept getting to bits where you're like, oh, well, they're past that bit. They're at this bit now, you know, giving themselves a chance. And when India took the new ball, of course, you had that shooter that ran along the ground to Hartley. So now you're thinking to yourself, well, is that what the new ball is going to do when India go out to bat? Or, is that because the roller is wearing off a little bit and the ball's still hard and it's doing magic things? Maybe they didn't want to take the new ball because of the roller and everything else. Eventually, England dismissed when Ollie Pope tries to reverse ramp, if I remember correctly, and got bowled. Of course, that's how that innings was going to finish. But why is he important? Because then he goes out in the field and he takes 2 catches, pretty much, well, certainly, we'll have a look at them in a bit, but they weren't your traditional catches. He wasn't even in your traditional position. And then, India went rogue with a pinch blocker at a time. But unfortunately, they lost Akshar Patel and KL Rahul. And then Stokes. Again, of course, Stokes. India thought they should steal a run to him. He clearly doesn't move the way that he used to. But the way that he used to was supernatural, right? Like, even just Ben Stokes moving normally with one leg, apparently, is still enough to get a run out. Then that was the point at which the game looked completely over. But that didn't happen either. India and England then sort of switched places. And India, I wouldn't say got back on top, but certainly milked that soft ball, right? Got to the point when the ball was soft a little bit, pushed it around, did everything that they needed to do to put pressure back on England. And then we had the whole, are they going to extend? Are they not going to extend? Which team does it help? Which team does it not help? We got shadows on the pitch, Ollie Pope, who hadn't spent enough time on the pitch, is fielding at silly point, and you can see his head between Ashwin's legs. Right, it's all happening, and then Hartley bowls just a magnificent ball. There were plenty of wickets he got through some luck, some bad balls, the general pressure of the situation. The Bharat wicket wasn't any of those, was it? That was just a fast, ripped spinner from on leg, maybe even outside leg, coming back to hit off stump. What a magnificent delivery. And of course, it had to finish that way, right? Of course it had to finish with Hartley, someone that in the first day's play didn't even look like he had a role to play in this match. And then by the end, just being the absolute hero of what was a crazy, stupid, ballsy comeback by England. What a miraculous game of cricket, realistically, that we've just witnessed. Or 2 of them, I suppose. Test cricket, hey? Let us get into the scoreboard, because that's what we're here for, aren't we? But, there was just there's so much going on. Trying to do the scoreboard today was absolutely one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, just because every time I started it, there was a new thing. So we'll probably, on the main channel, have videos for days. But let us at least try and make some sense of this madness, shall we? This is the largest first inning deficits overcome to win a test match from the ACS website. You could see that England is, this game is here. So I think that brings it in as the 10th biggest one. And just if you're an England fan, this is, where are we here? Just trying to get it. This is Headingley in 1981, right? So it's a few runs less than Headingley in 1981, but Headingley in 1981 was at home. And that Australian side was good. They weren't as good as this Indian side. And you had Botham and Willis kind of in their pomp in that particular one. A little bit different than Tom Hartley and Rehan Ahmed bowling, right? And, it's just a completely different situation. I don't know where you compare them overall, but I'm just putting it out there. It's a miraculous... Once you're overcoming a deficit of more than 150, and once you get towards 200 or, some of these ridiculous ones that are on this list, you do realize what a comeback this was, right? We can make caveats, of course, about the Indian lineup and certainly the batting and some of the stuff that happened in the field and how the baseball put them off and all that sort of stuff. That's fine. But you look at a graphic like this, and you do understand very, very, dramatically, just this is one of the biggest comebacks we have seen. And, how did England win this match? So there's so many different things. There's, Stokes' innings in the first, which, I almost forgot about it when writing. I had to go back to my notes to actually remember it. There was India gifting all those wickets when minimum 550 was really what they should have scored on this wicket against this attack, the way they started and everything else. There was that Bazball session, which was shellfish batting, right? It just absolutely bizarre the way that England went about batting in that session and completely put India off their game. Then you had the reverse sweeps of Ollie Pope, sort of continuing, even after Bumrah almost pulled it back, finding a way to stay in against Bumrah and then just continually knocking the Indian spinners just off kilter. And Ollie Pope in general, he had to bat before lunch, he then had to bat with the tail, and he then had to bat with the second new ball on the second day. Just all these, the Bumrah spell, working out, he's not been particularly good against Ashwin, didn't look particularly good in the first innings. It was just challenge after challenge. It was like someone could play a video game in front of you when they'd never actually been any good at the video game before. And then you have Tom Hartley at the end. Not to mention, we talked about Ben Stokes being the difference at the start, but that Jadeja, Jadeja and Iyer batting together, that was kind of the last moment where you thought that India was still really, really in this game, and you suddenly then have a situation where Stokes just comes from nowhere and does this, and you could argue that Hartley's bowling at times. I mean, Stokes got it completely wrong with Hartley in the first innings, and he changed what he did in the second innings, and helped a guy who'd taken 40 first-class wickets in 20 games, a proper part-timer, use the pressure of the situation against India and the pitch and everything else. But what a magnificent effort that was. So how did England win? It was all that stuff. Why don't we get to Tom Hartley here? I just want to talk about these first couple of wickets. It's because it was absolutely incredible. You can see here, they got a short leg in for Jaiswal, and he's essentially middled this straight to short leg. You get these from time to time. I'm not saying that this is a miraculous in itself, but this one doesn't look. I don't think we quite got the frame right here, and it looks a little bit. And it's just because there's a missing frame in the footage that we were looking at. But this looks a little bit more like it's an edge. But when you actually have a look at it, this takes a big chunk of the blade again of Shubman Gill. But it's not just that. This ball goes from here out to here to be caught. Silly point catches in modern cricket, that's like 1998, right? Like DRS has taken away a lot of these catches because the way that people bat now is so different. So to have a fielder under there and for him to be hit a ball almost off the face of the bat, this isn't an inside edge onto the pad that flicked up or anything, or something off the glove that Silly Point can pick up. It's just a remarkable sort of start for, Hartley in that. But I just want to show you this. This is his entire... Oh, I've got average here. This should be wickets. Sorry, everyone. This is his entire first-class career. So you can see, really struggled to take any wickets at the beginning. Has this nice little patch in here. I think this is around 2022. And then didn't take more than 2 wickets in an innings from... What's this one? His 5-wicket haul at the end of 2022 and through to now. So what's that? Almost a year and a half, maybe not quite a year and a half. There is an element of, I think, I'm trying to think of the best way of putting this. We did a real session on this yesterday with the England spinners, that there's such a huge disadvantage at the moment. I think even New Zealand and England spinners have it more than anyone else. Whereas West Indies, South Africa, Australia, Zimbabwe all have different conditions which can still help them produce spinners, or sometimes the spinners just have to bowl in those environments, and so they develop. And in England, it just doesn't happen. And you get someone like Hartley who just hasn't had the time to bowl big spells and be the person who has to win the game and put pressure on himself and work out how to bowl in the first innings and work out how to bowl against people who are very good against spin. All these different things that Hartley hasn't had the option to do. And one of the things I was saying yesterday is that I really frustrates me in cricket where someone like Hartley comes along and he's expected to bowl really good in India, and they give him the new ball, despite the fact he never bowled with the new ball before. But the other thing was that Hartley does not have a full-time spin bowling coach at his team. Yet the seam bowlers, who all have access to other senior seam bowlers who are all really, really good, always have access to that, right? And it's this running floor, and I understand the economics of county cricket and even international cricket at times. These things are hard. But we expect these guys with no background to just come in and do stuff. There is clearly some talent within Tom Hartley. Whether this might be the greatest day he ever had in Test cricket, but he is tall, he is fast, there are rotations on the ball. He's a good athlete as well. I like the way he moves in the field. I like the way he ran between the wickets. You know, just all that. There's a lot of different parts to his game where you're like, you know, maybe Ashton Agar like a player in some ways, right? But how is it that these guys are going to develop? There is latent talent within his bowling there, and you know, there's an element of randomness in these particular results, and so you almost have to appreciate it more because there are so many things that Tom Hartley had to do in this match for the first time, and to be there at the end and to put the pressure back on India as well as he did at times. You know, he still bowled the odd bad ball, but he solved a lot of his issues from the first innings to the second innings. So absolutely brilliant from him. And let's just talk about Pope a little bit as well. This is touring batters in India by match innings. So, you know, we know that as the game goes on in India, it gets a lot tougher. This pitch probably wasn't as much one of those kinds of pitches. It's weird. In some ways, it reminded me of sort of classic Indian wickets, except for the fact that it never quite deteriorated the way that we would expect one of those older wickets. So it was almost like a combination of like modern curating techniques, but like with one of those older wickets that gave you some runs, some wickets to spin. Seamers weren't completely dead. You know, there was a few things going on there, but it was an interesting innings. But this is touring batters in India by match innings in the last 10 years. You can see that, you know, the average in the first innings is 30, and then it's good luck. You know, it's just got harder and harder to bat, and you know, it's one of the reasons why when the ball rags on day one, that there is this element of it's going to roll downhill, and you know, we see that at times in these numbers specifically. And so this is the highest individual scores by touring batters in the third innings this century. You can see that, you know, McCullum obviously way up top, and well, I don't want to call Pope his protege because I think that's probably not what he is. He's a different kind of player, but it does show you what an incredible innings this was. There was some talk on the Discord channel about where this stands as, you know, one of the greatest English innings in India. The KP innings, there's the Cook innings, and there's a couple of older ones. So a Mike Gadding innings and a Foxy Fowler one as well. There was a point at which when the roller had taken some of the edge off the pitch, and you know, India looked solid at the start, if not spectacular. And I thought, if they just chase this down, Pope's innings is just going to be looked at as the wicket helped out. But the fact that Pope was the only one who really made any runs for England, and then no one made any runs for India, I really do think this was a fantastic innings, considering the sort of frenetic way he started, when Bumrah completely worked him over, but just all the history that goes into just how much he'd been struggling. I know we talked about it yesterday, but again, certainly deserves to be talked about today. I want to talk about, it's a very analytical point on a day when, you know, I started by being not very analytical, but I thought this whole thing of Akshar Patel coming out to bat early was really, really fascinating. We've seen Akshar do this before in limited overs cricket, and we've obviously seen Jadeja sometimes go up the order in Test cricket. Why I thought this was particularly funny is I think the idea was probably for Akshar to come in and bat at number 4, but they were not expecting 2 wickets back to back. So they were waiting to see who was going to go out first. Then when it was Jaiswal, they probably said to Akshar, pad up, and you can go in after Shubman goes in. But unfortunately, Shubman went out second ball. And so my guess is that then KL Rahul had to go out. So then you have Akshar coming out to bat before Shreyas Iyer, who's also a fantastic player of left arm finger spin. So it was all a little bit weird, and Akshar didn't really come out to attack. He really did come out more as or to block. He didn't, I think he came out specifically as a left-hander who is very good on those sorts of slow wickets and everything else. And if you look at, this is Indian batters over the last 3 years batting against spin in Asia. You see, sadly, Rishabh Pant, what a loss he is there. But you can see that Jadeja and Akshar Patel right up here on this Shreyas Iyer level, right? And that's not been the case for Sharma, and obviously Pujara has gone and Kohli's probably struggled the most. It's fair to say, though, when we look at something like this, that there's a lot of different factors, one of which is these guys haven't played as many tests as other players. They often also, these two guys, have not always faced the hard ball. They've often had to come in later on when the ballers start to spin a little bit slower and everything else. And being the left-handers, I suppose the main left-handers in the side at times as well, perhaps teams were maybe more set up to take down the right-handers or everything. That's probably not here or there. But I thought the whole thing was really, really interesting. I like when teams try and use their resources the best way they can. And, he made 20-odd. One thing I would say is once they did that, it did mean that Bharat and Ashwin had to bat together. And I thought their partnership was magnificent, obviously. And, they did well to drag India back into a position where they had a chance at winning again. But that partnership probably needed one player who could hit boundaries in it. And had it been Bharat and Akshar, right, and Akshar could get away a couple of boundaries, that might have just put a little bit of pressure back on England. I mean, having said that, butterfly effect, who knows what happens if Akshar doesn't come in and everything else. But I just thought that was an interesting, that's what happens when you change your order like that. And they just put themselves into a position where they were a little bit more one-paced. Having said that, they batted really well, the one-paced dudes. And then lastly, I found this fascinating because I think Star put this up on the screen just before the end. So since 2011, in India's 41 wins, they are spinning the ball 3.7 degrees. And in their 4 losses, the ball is spinning 4.3 degrees. And this test was 4.2 degrees. This is the thing. I don't want to be too confirmation biased with this because I obviously wrote when it was indoor, when they lost to Australia in indoor, that making the pitches rag so much brings in a sense of randomness that that allows lesser teams to beat them. Whereas on flatter pitches, I don't know how they would go. This pitch did spin a long way. Having said that, it wasn't like some of those other pitches that they've lost tests on, right? And it certainly wasn't like the Australian wickets, if we go back to that series. This was a really good test wicket. Yes, it spun a long way. The sideways spin was quite big, but there was only a couple of balls where that was hugely influential. Realistically, I would say that, especially once the ball got soft and as days 2 and 3 and 4 came about, people were handling it. KS Bharat might argue with me a little bit, but I think people were handling it a lot better towards that part, that part of the game. So I don't know if this quite fits in, but I put it here because it is a really interesting thing. The other thing is that I think if you go back to the numbers we showed a moment ago, when you are ragging the ball that much, even batters who are brought up in spin playing conditions and are good players of spin are really going to struggle with it. We saw that a lot of those players on this list here who are down this end, right, these 3 specifically, maybe even Ashwin as well, before India started making their wickets rag as much as they have, these were really good players of spin as well. So, you're kind of, there is an element, and I've talked about this before, of sucking the confidence out of your batting. If you look at the batting lineup today, you've got, obviously Rohit is absolutely fine. Who's the next batter there that you're really massively confident in? It's probably Shreyas Iyer and Jadeja in these conditions. Jaiswal's still young, massive talent. No one's got any issue there. Shubman Gill, it's just not working in Test cricket at the moment. Again, massive talent. I would assume it eventually comes good. KL Rahul, not, I don't even know if he was on my list, but I think he averages 20 or 25 against spin in Asia in the last 3 years. But we're talking about a mid-30s player. I've talked about his strengths a lot, but he's certainly got a lot of weaknesses as well. Akshar Patel, an all-rounder, really. And Shrikar Bharat, like a really good backup player, of course. And I'm going to say it again, a safe pair of hands. Although no one was a safe pair of hands with some of those balls today. But both of the keepers, I suppose, struggled there at times. But certainly, Shrikar Bharat is not on the level of batting as Rishabh Pant is, right? As few people are there. It's just different if you think back to having Pujara, Kohli, obviously, Rishabh Pant, I'm missing someone, Rahane. It's not about talent, because I think this lineup is pound for pound as talented. But Jaiswal is young. Shubman is still making his way. Shreyas Iyer is young. Shrikar Bharat is just not the same kind of player that Rishabh Pant is. The ability to put pressure back, the experience, all those things. That is why old players keep getting picked by teams, right? There is a reason for all that as well. Anyway, no, I've already done all that, haven't I? I think that's me. That is the end of the scoreboard part of the show for the day. But we don't end here. Oh, no. We go on. I mean, quite literally, it feels. At times I go on. If you have any questions, I see there's already tons in the bank. But if you're desperate to ask a super chat, please put those in. But the more comments, the better. Throw us a like, because that really helps this as well. As I said, there'll be plenty of videos over on the main show, but this is Jared Kimber on the scoreboard, and we'll be back after this break with questions from you or someone.
If you have always wanted to turn your passion for sports into a career, well, I have the course for you. Fans with Laptops is the multimedia course that I came up with after millions of reads, views, and listens to all my work. It's designed for anyone to use their own fandom to get better at making content on the sport they love. Go to Fans with Laptops today. If me talking live about cricket is not enough, we also have an entire channel dedicated to the best stories in cricket called Good Areas. Find out what matchups really mean, understand the logic behind baseball, and look at the most important selection in the history of cricket of Basil D'Oliveira. Come and visit us a couple of times a week on the Good Areas channel for a new video.
All right, welcome back. We've got a bunch of questions and comments from everyone, but keep getting them in, because we've got plenty of time there. I wouldn't have thought so. I thought my opening monologue was like 28 years long. It was actually a very hard day's cricket to analyse. I suppose fifth days can be a bit like that sometimes. Fourth days, but fifth day energy. Today I had very strong fifth day energy. Samit's got a super chat in. He says, what a great day for Test. England storming past India, West Indies beating Australia with Joseph channeling Malcolm Marshall. Can't wait for the detailed discussion on both with Bayram. Yeah, we'll be back tomorrow night for Uncovered. Uncovered is being split into two different shows, just because of days like today, which you can't actually contain in one show. But we're recording it on YouTube as one show tomorrow night. So it'll be Uncovered and a new show called Overthrows. And Overthrows will be the one where we'll be talking about all this sort of stuff. So stay tuned, and thank you for your support. Chitra says, it's a bad day to be an Aussie in England. I don't really worry about all that sort of stuff, if we're being honest. It's a great day to be a Test cricket fan. I enjoyed it. I think the West Indies one is random, because I was following it a little bit, obviously, but commentating on another match only so much. I had the iPad on for a little bit today. In fact, some stages I was like getting confused which game I was watching, because I was also trying to keep my head in the commentary. But it's a magnificent day. I love West Indies cricket. There's obviously people involved with that team that I'm friends with. Shamar Joseph is incredible. I love Alzari Joseph, and I think he's a real talent. I wish he would be able to do the things that he did in this game more consistently. Watching Brian Lara and Carl Hooper be so emotional over a win is huge. And, as someone who's covered a lot of big Test series in my time, the worst thing that can happen is, like, after day 2, there was that thought of, this could be, India could win all these tests in 3 days. England will never get going, and it could be really, really draining. And for me, when I'm working in a Test series, especially a long one, anything 3 tests and longer, you really want the away team or the underdog to win the first test, and sometimes they're the same team. And the reason is it just gets the energy going, right? And yeah, if India won today, especially if they managed to steal that, there would be 10,000 people, on this live compared to, a couple of thousand views that we'll probably get from this live, right? That's fine. And, so I lose a little bit there. But this is now a living, breathing series, right? India are going to have to win at least 2 more tests to win this series. Like, just cool little things like that. So it's, and I, being a test cricket fan to me is much more important than, being an Australian. I'm an Australian by accident of birth, right? I chose test cricket. I was going to say it's the least nationalistic thing I've ever said, but it's not. It's probably not in the top 10. Ayush says, the kinds of things that England are doing, given the rot before, would this be possible without the Stokes-McCullum think tank? Could McCullum have pulled this off in any other team? I think the one thing I've said from the start with Bazball is, I think if you'd come in with any sort of dramatic... if you look at the sort of the Ed Smith plan of like telling his openers to score, face 100 balls rather than make runs, that's actually also quite a dramatic way. It's maybe not as dramatic as Bazball, but again, when you come into a team that's doing really poorly or inconsistently or everyone's frustrated with, you actually do get a bit of a carte blanche. I think McCullum and England has such a special relationship. I don't think people really fully understand how revered he is within English cricket. I remember this Nick Knight special where Nick Knight was like treating him, I'm trying to even think who it was, but he was treating him like like an all-conquering general. And Brendan McCullum's like, it's not that hard, mate. I just do this, right? And he, the impact he had on Owen Morgan, like they'd already copied New Zealand style once and redefined their entire history as a white ball team, right? So even before he took the job, it was there, and he had that sort of thing. And so if you think about it, they had already done this. So when you say the Stokes thing, I think the Stokes part of it is really, really important, and I think it's why it continues to be interesting and dynamic. But whereas I think after a while, if you look at the Morgan Bayliss years, they were certainly really exciting, but they had a real template of how to play, right? Whereas now the template is a little bit more whatever we want to do today, or whatever, vibes based, as Vish might say, right? So I think McCullum would have had free reign, but the unique combination of McCullum and Stokes, I didn't know how this would go. I'm always wary about changing coaches because generally you're just changing coaches because you're losing. You're not changing coaches because you've got this magical idea of a coach from outside that's going to fix things, because generally coaches don't make that much of a difference, right? Then on top of that, I thought it was surprising. I thought McCullum would go for the white ball job. So the fact he went for the red ball job was incredible. It's just been a wild ride when you think about it. And, I've talked a lot about the tactical sides of Bazball, and the players, former players especially, will talk about the vibes, right? and the intent and the positivity. And that combination of keeping all those things going in the right direction, even when, look at the 2 press conferences they gave on the end of day one. Ben Duckett comes out and says, we were above par. They weren't above par. We all know that. I think, looking back on it, they got more runs than India would have wanted them to get, but they weren't above any sort of par total, especially the way that India batted after that. And then on day 2, Jeetan Patel said they bowled really, really well, and the results just didn't go their way. And it's like, no, they didn't. They did not bowl well. They bowled poorly, right? But again, they're looking at this in a different way. And you can't help but, for someone like me, I moved to the UK in 2007, and I've been covering the team pretty much since 2008. Or maybe I moved here in 2008. Yeah, maybe I started covering the team in 2009. For a long time, I just wasn't interested. If you go back and look at the history of my Cricket Info writing, I would write about England when there was something to be written about, obviously. But a lot of times I would be writing about the opposition teams. And it was just because they were more interesting, right? Whether they were good, whether they were bad, whether they were trying something, whether they had... It the England team just wasn't like that. There were little moments when they were really, really interesting. The Andy Flower Moneyball era was certainly one, and there were certain players that are very, very fascinating. But I reckon there was one year, to go back to your whole point here, Ish, where I think I wrote more about Brendan McCullum in 1 year than I did the England team, right? So this now is so fascinating, and I don't know how many articles I've written about Bazball and this movement and everything, but it really is, even if it doesn't ultimately work, it's one of the most fascinating things to happen in Test cricket in a long time from an intellectual point of view. And from a fan point of view, it's fucking nuts. What's not to like? Like, I can only imagine what this would be like if you're like a 16-year-old who loves Test cricket, because I remember Australia being marginally attacking, right? Or watching the West Indies and go, wow, this is crazy. This is nothing. This is just on a completely different level than anything we ever saw there before. It's so exciting, and it's so dramatic, and it's so weird, and it's so funny, and it's so interesting, and it's so full of stories. It's just brilliant to watch. Ayush says, did we just see a very royal spinner being deluded into thinking he's a champion by his captain? Is that the secret? My favourite team bowled crap with Maharaj in the team in 2019. No, look, I think we've seen, Kuhneman, Jason Krejci, many spinners who are not the full. Jason Krejci is a really, really interesting parallel to Tom Hartley's test, because in some ways they're both kind of all-roundery, right? Probably not quite batters, but certainly the fact that they can hold a bat plays a part. They were never really ever frontline spinners, much more part-timery in the way that they bowl, but were, in the side. I think with Krejci, he was always the second spinner. I suppose with Hartley, he was the second spinner as well. Now Lancashire have hired Nathan Lyon, so he's probably still the second spinner there. But if you look at their best ball, you can see why it works in these conditions. Whether it's replicable anywhere else, probably not, right? I mean, other parts of Asia, even in Sri Lanka, I'd be interested. UAE, I think he could bowl quite well. Don't think he'd be bowling particularly well in Pakistan. Bangladesh is a really interesting one, but I won't get too much into the weeds on that. But he's left-arm finger spinner, so he's made for Bangladesh. But the point being that he has the raw tools that make sense. And we were chatting in our Discord community. If you don't follow us on Patreon, if you do follow us on Patreon, you get access to a Discord community. And there was a really interesting conversation where people were saying, I don't know why they've taken this punt on him. And I said, well, if you look at the raw package, he does have height, he does put revolutions on the ball, and he does bowl quickly. There's no reason why that can't work. First innings, he couldn't put the ball where he wanted to put it. I think Stokes misused him in the first innings. I think he shouldn't have been using with the new ball. He should have had more protection. I thought he looked much better in the second innings when he had protection available to him. Just looking after him a little bit more. But also, Stokes just kept saying, just keep bowling, mate. Just keep bowling. So you need that as well, right? You do. All these things are important. But he does have the raw skills to be able to do that. Whether it's replicable, I mean, who knows, right? He might not take a lot of wickets throughout the rest of the series. Who knows what the pitch is going to be like from here on in as well? Are they going to be on his side and everything else? It's a fascinating thing, I think, Tom Hartley. Bloody says, Bloody Bugger, I'm convinced by the nostalgia merchants, even with DRS, no way Tendulkar, Laxman, Dravid, Ganguly would suffer against this English attack. Michael Clark takes 6 for 9 against India once? What are we talking about? We just talked about Jason Krejci taking 12 wickets as well. Mate, these things happen. It is 100% part of it. There is was that a super chat? No, sorry. There's a super chat from Ashwin. I think the guys have got it in. I'll get to it in a minute. Oh, that was a super chat from Bloody Bugger. Thank you, mate. Nuval says, does India not have meetings to develop strategies to counter the opposition? They panicked. Why do they never have a plan beyond give it to Bumrah? I said this yesterday, Nuval. It's very different when you're a spin bowling team than you're a seam bowling team, just because there are rarely as many plans available to you. If you go back, I think there were some plans that they tried. They had a 7-2 field for Bairstow. It's funny how we don't look at things like that. They got punched in the mouth a little bit by Ollie Pope, but the rest of the batters didn't really get away from them, right? So to say that they didn't have a plan, I think is unfair, because I thought they planned quite well for the players that they did dismiss. I I think they had a plan to Ollie Pope, and he didn't play to that plan, which is good for him, but also sometimes, first mover advantage, right? Then you had Hartley and Rayan Ahmed, who again, they would not have had great plans for. I'm not protecting the Indian analysts here, but I would have struggled to come up with a plan for Hartley. Maybe because he hasn't made a lot of runs. Rayan Ahmed might be slightly easier. There's a little bit more footage of him. But even then, you don't have a lot of footage of him batting in Asia, right? And it probably wouldn't be a lot of footage of either of them playing against spin. So I think that's an issue. To go the other way, though, and I think there's another question like this later on, but I am quite interested in this. If you have a look at India as in this game, when they batted, they looked like a team who wasn't quite sure how to just crush the opposition, because they hadn't played on a lot of flat pitches where you just bat for days and days and days until the game is over. Like, they 100% should have ended this game with their first innings, right? And then you watch them bowling, and they look like a team again who hasn't really had to think about taking wickets all that often, right? This goes back to the wickets they've been playing on, right? Even away from home. A lot of seam-dependent wickets. Ball's been nipping around. Give it to Bumrah, give it to Siraj, give it to Shami. Ishant when he was bowling good, right? And then you've got a holding spinner, and if you want, Ashwin as well. Even Shardul, just throwing the ball, he'll nip you out a couple if the ball's moving around. You come back to India, and the pitches are ragging. The seamers don't have to, worry about things too much. And it's just like the biggest issue that you had. I mean, some of those test matches was like, they didn't know how to use their third spinner because their first two spinners were bowling too well, right? This is different. And maybe we don't see wickets like this for the rest. Maybe, I don't know what direction they could go in. But this was a wicket where you really had to think a little bit more. And maybe that was the problem with them in the field, that they weren't ready for it. But as I just said, I do think they had pretty good plans for quite a few of the batters that they did dismiss, right? Stokes and Pope, the only two that went past decent scores. I'm trying to remember the overall scores in this. I need the scorecard in front of me. I've got 83 windows open. I've probably got the scorecard open 7 times. I do that sometimes. I just want to have a look at the score. So let's just have a look here. Stokes got 70. No one else passed 37 in the first innings. And then in the second innings, no one else passed 50. So you really are talking about Ollie Pope's innings there, right? So again, you are focusing in, and I get why, and I don't think there's no nuggets of truth in your thing, but you're focusing in on the fact that they didn't have any plans, when actually they were really successful all the way through, except with 2 batters, right? And a couple of tail enders. Life's tough sometimes. Bloody bugger, I have no idea. I've now completely lost which one of yours are super chats or not. But let's say this is another super chat. This match has broken my brain. These 2 test matches have broken my brain. I have caved and reject your rational argument that 2000s Indian batters didn't have to face DRS. Nobody drove it like... Oh, you've asked that twice, sorry. That's why we don't repeat our questions. I've already said. I think people have forgotten what... So there was a test match. I want to find it, actually, because I just had it here. So this was a test match in 2004, Australia's tour of India. Australia's spinners was Nathan Horitz, and then in the second innings, I'm trying to have a look. I know Michael Clark bowled. Nathan Horitz opened the bowling, right? So Nathan Horitz and Michael Clark, and in this test match, bloody bugger, India made 104 and 205. Right? Horitz took 3 wickets for 16 in the first innings. Seamers did really, really well to back him up, and I don't think Clark bowled in that one. And then Horitz and Clark combined for 8 wickets in the second innings. Horitz got Laxman and Tendulkar. Clark got Dravid, Mohammad Kaif, Dinesh Karthik, and Harbhajan Singh, and a couple of tail enders there, right? Can we stop? It's just, right? We've got to be realistic. It is very different. There was a period of time before India started making the pitches rag where Pujara, Kohli were both averaging well over, I think it was 70 or 80 against spin in India, and perhaps worldwide. Then they changed the wickets. Did they forget how to play spin? No. The wicket's changed. And the players are different now too. I think that's fair. And the methods are different. That's why I was so shocked with the Shubman Gill short catch. Anyway, Ashwin with his super chat says, was just looking at the batting averages for India's middle order this game. And is this the first time in 25 years that India has no middle order batters with test averages over 40? Well, Rahane and KL Rahul must have batted together. But they would have had Kohli. So he would. It sort of depends on what you mean by middle order. Everyone's a little bit different, you know. But if you're meaning 4, 5, 6, while Kohli's there, that certainly wouldn't have been the case. So unless there's a game that Kohli missed that someone else came in, I'm trying to think of what happened in Australia. The batting order in the Australia series, you'd have to have a look at that. But I would have thought there was a chance in that series, although Rishabh Pant was probably just over 40, 41, 42 around that time. He might have dipped below 40 in one of those tests. And Pujara would have been at 3. Rahane would have been at 4. And was Bahari at 5? So it's possible it's happened before. But yeah, I think that's what I was getting at in the scoreboard part, Ashwin, which is, you know, you look at this and these are not guys who are like, I think the thought in TalkSport was, and yeah, so I was watching the betting markets really, really carefully because there was something wrong with the betting markets all day today. England was 6-1 at the start of the day. And I was like, well, England are not 6-1 to win this game. They are far more likely to win this game than 6-1. So there's something wrong there with the odds. So I was watching the odds all day, and our thoughts were that once they lost 2 wickets, that was going to be very, very tough for India to get home, just because they didn't have the experience and the Warriors, just the old experienced Warriors who've been there before and done that. And it was interesting that the market didn't adjust to that. You know, there was obviously, I think they went from favourites, obviously, maybe, you know, one I think in decimals they were about 140 and they went to about 280, 260 maybe. But they stayed there. And again, we were looking at this going, well, there's KL Rahul's not playing the spin as well. I mean, overall, I think he probably had a fairly good test match, but it just didn't look like he was completely set. Akshar Patel was up there, so that was a chance of getting England a little bit more confidence to get another wicket. Shreyas Iyer in the helmet. I was supposed to do that on Scoreboard. I think we forgot about it in the end. I took a photo of it here somewhere. What a remarkable thing that was, watching him with a helmet and thinking, does that mean he believes he has to sweep? Like, how much did their mindset change from the first innings to the second innings? Really, you know, just really, really interesting things like that. But yeah, it certainly wasn't as good a team as we've seen before. Shirag says, you answered my question about the betting markets yesterday. That bet clearly worked out for me. I don't know what bet you did. Oh, well, that's awesome. What a fascinating day of Test cricket, well and truly alive. Wonder if he was asking about England's odds. I'm trying to think back to that. Yeah, look, I haven't bet on cricket in a very long time, but I've started to, especially through working with Cricket 8 and some of those guys who are traders and former bettors and current bettors, I suppose, in some cases, I've sort of come to a position where I'm very interested in the way the markets work and everything. And I've watched them really, really closely today, and I think if you can, I don't want to suggest anyone should bet because I think everyone shouldn't bet. But I also know that people are going to bet whether I say that or not. But there are trends within the market where I do think that if you're reading the game closely and not reacting to the latest partnership or the latest wicket, that there are plenty of interesting things out there. So for instance, today, there was a person online who said, what's going to happen to, is the roller going to be used tomorrow morning? I think that's a really, really good question. And I said, yes, you use a roller at the beginning of the day's play, even if you've already started your innings. And he said, well, that's it, India's going to win. And I said, yeah, but you're doing the classic fallacy of that this partnership of Barrett and Ashwin is working. And so therefore, that's going to carry through. That's a common mistake you see in the betting markets. Of once 2 batters look settled, and it's almost like the betting markets don't see how this partnership could ever fail again, right? And when at that stage, I'm trying to think, India came back into about, they were quite short. I can't remember how short they came in to, but I was sitting there going, wow, this is now a very good bet on England, because England are most likely going to win this game, because one ball plays up, and we've got two tailenders who really can't bat. And so, it's just little things like that with the market. I think it's a fascinating thing to look at. You've noticed, if you've been following my work for a while, really, I like that. I like, looking at the team lines. I like looking at the World Cup odds as they change and I'll probably do the same for the IPL this year. I just think it's a fascinating way of looking at cricket. And also, I think it's one of those things, again, that cricket does not talk about betting enough. There's a big stigma in some societies within cricket because of betting, and also because of the match fixing because of betting. The truth is that legal bookmakers are one of our best defenses against match fixing, which I don't think is talked about enough. But also, just on top of that, people are betting anyway. And there should be better information for them to make informed decisions. And, we don't want the bookies to take the money, right? We don't just want people making stupid bets. The more information that we can give, the more help that we can give. I just think it's a really interesting one going ahead. Leshan says, why does it seem that India doesn't have a plan of action when bowling in some matches? Oh, we talked about this before. I've talked about that already. I think it's worth asking, but I also think that it's the Ricky Ponting conundrum, right? Oh no, what do? I'll just throw the ball to Bumrah. Oh no, what do? I'll just throw the ball to Ashwin. At a certain point, your captaincy skills are probably slightly dulled. If you're captaining a team like Stokes, where you come in and go, how the hell am I going to take 20 wickets? I'm going to have to try this, and I'm going to have to manufacture this, right? Rohit doesn't really have to manufacture wickets because he's just got really good bowlers. So I do think there's an element of that. Plus, the wickets over the last couple of years have certainly been a little bit more like that. All right, let's take another long break. That is a clue for my producers. I think Rakesh is on today. Just a bit of a long break here so that I can just go through and see if there's any more questions. Certainly, I will answer any more super chats if they come in, but I'll go through the room. I can see there's heaps in there. Remember, like, subscribe, do all those things. We're going to be here for every day of this test series, not just the glorious ones like today. I am Jared Kimber, and this is Scoreboard.
This is just one of our YouTube channels. We also have another one that covers the greatest stories in our sport called Good Areas. Why do India keep losing World Cups? How did Stuart Broad become a meme king? And the long sordid history of South Africa chasing. Head over to Good Areas a couple of times a week for the best stories in cricket. A few years ago, I had a panic attack after ESPN Cricinfo made me their global writer. I'd earned that position, but I also felt like a fraud at the time because I didn't really understand how I wrote. I understand that there was a process and gears and different styles and things, but how it all came together felt a little bit random. And so I began to panic like a golfer with a natural swing, worried one day I'd just end up with the yips. And would my career be over? So I took my writing apart piece by piece until I understood it. And then I figured out I could teach others all the mistakes I had learned. So I started an online course where I tried to make it as cheap as possible so people like me would be able to afford it. It's called Fans with Laptops, and heaps of people from around the world have used it so far, from first-time writers all the way through to professionals trying to improve. I started with a simple plan to make each writer the best they could be, and from the feedback I've received over the years, it seems like the course does that. But after COVID, my career changed. I came to YouTube, started podcasts, wrote emails, and formed a new career on my own going forward. So I now had something else to offer, the multimedia side of things, social media and everything else. Not to mention that I was building everything up as an independent. And so I added all of that to my course. So if you have ever wanted to work in sports as a writer or podcaster or making videos or anything else, Fans with Laptops is the place to start. If you think you qualify as a fan and you have a laptop and you want to work in sport, click on the link.
All right, welcome back to Scoreboard. I am Jared Kimber. Pranay says, how should someone interested in analytics get started? I read Moneyball and then realized that it was kind of more of a novel or non-fiction novel type of thing than a real book. And so there was a Coursera course that was around at the time that was about sports analytics. I did a little bit of that, but and then what did I do next? I read Thinking Basketball, and I forget what the other one is called. Basketball on Paper, is it called? by the Stephen Shea book. But there's heaps of really good books out there that are worth having a look at. There's the MVP Machine. There's if you like football, there's also the cricket ones. There is Cricket 2.0 with Freddie and Tim. There is Ben and Nathan's book, Against the Spin. Are they the only two? I think they're the two major ones. Wigmore's got another one, but it's a little bit more about data and cricket rather than sort of being doing analysis. But I learned it through other sports, if we're being honest. I learned it through basketball and then worked my way back to cricket. So once I found that there was another sport that I knew really well and they had used analytics, I then went, okay, well, how does that work back with here? But yeah, there's certainly some really good people to follow. Dan Weston is certainly someone to follow online. Prasanna's online, isn't he? Trying to think who else. Like, there's plenty of people out there that you can follow on cricket Twitter. Amel Desai, who worked for me for ages. I'm trying to think of other people, but yeah, there's Cheyenne, who works for me. It really is, a lot of it is about whether you can code, what information you can find. Crick Sheets has a lot of it, of course. But yeah, there's always a way of getting there. All Things Cinema says, what makes Jamal Joseph that good that he won a test literally in a spell, taking 7 for? It's funny, Darren Goff was watching him, and Goffey hadn't seen him before today. And Goffey was like, oh, he bowls like me. And there's a bit of that. He's maybe less bustling than Goffey, but he's like almost like a combination between Malcolm Marshall and Darren Goff. That, the ability to get constant sideways movement at pace. There's also, though, something else in him, almost like a Fidel Edwards slinginess about him. He feels like he's very much always at you. As a bowler, I need to do a lot more analysis because almost every time I see him bowl a ball, he seems to take a wicket at the moment. So I need to see more of his dot balls to get a real idea of it. But pace and lateral movement, work ethic, the ability to bowl long spells, all these things. I think those are the main ones that I've seen at the moment. Accuracy, I suppose, as well. Although I'm trying to think how accurate he is. He's not express. But he's pretty quick as well, isn't he? There's a lot of different parts of that. Sty says, why doesn't Baz coach the white ball team? I think they were splitting the job up. Honestly, I don't think anyone should, unless you think of the position now as more of a director of cricket role or a management role. I don't think anyone should be in charge of white ball cricket and red ball cricket. Not just because they're diverging, just because I don't know how you can put enough time into each one. Right? Like, as an analyst, if I was to be offered a job with a major country, I would be happy to run the analysis department or work on one form or the other. But I wouldn't want to be in a situation where I'm just the team analyst. I'm like, okay, we just finished this test series. Now I got 3 T20s. Okay, yeah. Well, we did the research on these teams. I just don't think you can prepare as well. And so I think certainly that can change. Josh says, there were certain things yesterday when Pope and Folks were batting, poor body language, half-hearted chases. Wouldn't see that under McCullum. Well, the poor body language, let's get off the chair for a moment. We're all amateur psychologists. Poor fielding, certainly. Half-hearted chases, I don't really remember them. I remember bad fielding from full-blooded chases. It's funny, when Ashwin and Barrett were batting today, I thought England looked equally clueless, for instance. I thought England looked equally clueless at times in the first innings. I thought, if you go back to the Lyon Cummins spell, I thought England looked clueless. There have been plenty of times under McCullum where I thought, they're going back to old habits here. They don't do it as long. I thought there were times in this game when they just didn't try to manufacture wickets. Me and KP talked about it a lot in commentary. It's one of it's the least sexy part of baseball, but it's one of the bits of baseball, right? That they really manufacture wickets and they're proactive and they take risks. There were times in this test where I was just like, they're just going through the motions, waiting for India to make a mistake here, rather than trying to force them into making a choice between hitting a 4 and something else. I think sometimes if India had won the test, I wonder if that would have stuck with you as much, Josh, right? What if Ashwin and Barrett had brought England home, right? The narrative then would be, England had that game completely, and then they, lost energy at the end and didn't focus enough. Whereas, do you want to know what the truth probably would have been? It would have been exactly the same thing that happened for Pope and Folkes. The ball got old and soft. Sometimes it's as simple as the ball gets old and soft, and teams don't know what to do, right? Now, that goes back to the whole conversation we've been having all the way through about lack of imagination and, bowling captains being used to just getting wickets because so many wickets have fallen up. All these things are fair, but worth remembering that. Lempredi says, root ball seemed to fizzle out the deeper into the test match England went. Is that the physical toll of what's being asked just too unreasonable? It's the most overs he'd ever bowled in a first innings. He went in when Bumrah was on a spell, right? So I don't know if that is something. We did look this up. CricViz had these numbers. If this was a normal day, we would have done probably something on it for the show. But CricViz had these numbers that suggest that in India, he's a much better first innings bowler than a second innings bowler. And I think he likes a little bit more pace on the pitch. And as the wickets get a little bit slower, he struggles a little bit he likes having that a little bit of extra pace, the ability to slide one on and spin it, more than maybe what the pitch was asking for today, which was just the big ragging balls. It's hard because he took the 5 for 9 or whatever it was, and so that clouds your memory a little bit, right? And it clouds the stats a little bit, I should say. So I don't know how much that is, but I think when you see those numbers, it does kind of feel like he would be a better bowler in the first innings, and he got a Bumrah spell that went against him. But having said all that, I mean, it's a fair question, and I think he said he was fine with it. But we shouldn't see it in the first test, right? Although everyone gets tired even within a test. We should really see the impact of him having to do this in the second and third and fourth tests, and fifth test, all the other tests, maybe third, fourth, and fifth. Sam says, I love that you were struggling to watch both games while commentating. I was struggling while sitting on the couch drinking Cab Sav. It was real when the end of the West Indies game happened. I think it was around the double wicket time, and so I was trying to get in, but also I didn't want to step on Manners who was commentating wicket. It was a really exciting time in both Test matches at the same time. So I didn't do great commentary of the 2 wickets, which I had plenty to say about, and I probably didn't do great justice to the fantastic finish of Josh Hazlewood getting castled at the end. So I kind of stuffed it up twice, but that's how these things go. Raoul says, love your work. I love you, Raoul. Well, I mean, maybe. I don't know. Maybe we should see other people. Did England win the match or did India lose it? I mean, look, it's both, right? I mean, if you're always going from that. India, I would say, had 2, 3 really good positions in this game. Probably should have got England out cheaper in the first innings. Certainly should have made over 500 in their innings. The Bumrah spell on day 3 put them in a situation where they could have again I can't remember if England were in front again at that point, but wouldn't have had the bat very much or whatever it was at that point. So there's 3 big moments where India had a chance and didn't take it, but you've got to give Pope credit, Hartley credit, the tail, the sort of the lower order of England. The Bazball start, they did a lot of things, run out of Stokes. They just did a lot of things right. It's probably not something that has changed this game massively. But it's also worth remembering that there were 2 run-outs in this game. Ashwin was run out in the first innings, and then the tail collapsed. And the last probably specialist batting partnership, I think I'm right in saying, I think it was Iyer and Jadeja batting together, and there was another run-out. And we all said, how is England going to take 20 wickets? Well, 2 run-outs helps, right? It's little. I know it's not massive, and they might have still got the 20 wickets anyway. But what if Ashwin sticks around and makes 30 in that first innings, and the rest of the tail bat a little bit better, get themselves into a position where they do get up towards 480, 500, right? Perfectly reasonable to think they could have done that. Now England are 230, 240 behind, and Bumrah has his spell. I don't know, maybe the ball still gets soft and they still do. All those things are still possible, but there was a lot of, you have to give England credit for what they did, but you also have to remember that India played a part as well. Oh, I've already done that, Prano. Oh, I said the books, didn't I? All right, this is the last question, and it's magnificent. Well, it's not even a question. Shrek says, I won a 17 odd long shot on England winning. There was definitely a mispricing. There was no way they were that long. And you answered my question and you said about Pope's money line yesterday. 17 to 1 shot. Chirac, man. And no super chat. Dude, I must be due, what, 2% of that wage? Of that win? No, enjoy your wins. Go get yourself some takeaway or do whatever you need to do. It's fantastic. As I said, I don't want to encourage people to bet. I come from a family where my grandfather essentially lost his house through gambling, right? Like, I'm very aware what gambling does. I come from a huge betting culture in Melbourne, of course. We have a public holiday for a horse race. Grew up betting, had my own issues with betting at times when I was younger as well. Certainly had, I flirted with an addiction. Maybe it was an addiction, actually. I mean, I don't know what the definition of addiction is. But I also understand that people are going to bet anyway. And that, one of the things I always want to do is I kind of just want to make cricket fans smarter and think about things deeper and peel things back. And you guys make me smarter with your questions and your comments and, and everything else as well. So it goes both ways. But it doesn't matter to me if you're a fantasy game player, if you are just a person who talks to his friends and, they say stupid things and you can go, oh no, it's not actually the game. Batters aren't doing particularly well at the moment, if you are going to gamble anyway, hopefully I can point out some things or better ways to do it, going ahead, smarter ways. There are many people making a lot of money from trading on sports gambling, patterns and everything else. But the idea of when I first started this, it was really sharing. It was learning and sharing in that way, and I think that's kind of what we're still doing here. All these years later, now that I'm an old man, I'm still doing it, and and my career has changed a lot. It's a fascinating test, or a day of Test cricket for me. It kind of starts for me being in the middle of the Kevin Peterson, Harsha Bogle thing, where you'll find that clip up on the TalkSport channel, where in a moment of two men very aggressively stating their case at times, or very passionately, maybe not aggressively, stating their case at times, and I'm in there talking about ambidextrous bowlers. I've got a lot of emails from friends who don't even follow cricket that much who saw that video, right? Or those clips or the articles, and all that sort of stuff. You've got the double tests. England recording this, whereas I was obviously supposed to be in India. All these different things that are going on at the moment, and it's fantastic to be in a position where so many different people come to this site for so many different reasons. The main site will have a video, as I will finish that after this recording. So that will probably go up in a couple of hours, depending on Moku's speed. We will have another video about how England have won this test match. And I've talked about some of the reasons already, but just going deep as well. So there'll be a good couple of videos, and I want to do one on the England in the sweep shot, which try and get out before the next test as well. So heaps of content here. Obviously, me and Bayram will be doing footmarks. Don't know what footmarks is going to be about actually this week. I'll have to check. Might be Meg Lanningham. Might be something else. Might be. I don't know what it's about. We're doing overthrows, which will be on the 2 test matches, and maybe some of the under-19 cricket as well, and some of the other internationals that were played. And we'll be doing Uncovered as well, which will be about the news and this week in cricket and everything else. But that's me. I am done. Thank you very much to everyone who joined in this test match. If it's your first time to Scoreboard, chuck us a like. It takes very little effort. But subscribe. We're here all the time. We try and talk about cricket in a way that is slightly different than your uncle yelling on the sofa. Not that that's not fun as well. A lot of uncles, a lot of sofas. Chuck us a like, subscribe, tell your friends, and everything else. And that is it from the first test at Hyderabad. This is a Scoreboard, and I am Jared Kimber.
If you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/Kimber, Kimber, to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan plus 4 additional months for free. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a night watchman protects his stumps in the last over. If you make a lot of content like me, and I certainly do, you will need some help. And that is why on my network, we use Memento, a slicing and dicing tool that uses AI to conjure up great clips from your podcasts, chats, and meetings. If you make content and you want a better way of sharing it and making it smaller, go to memento.fm today.